Welcome to Career Tools. This week, Types of Mentors, Chapter 2. The questions this cast answers are, why do I need a mentor? Do I need more than one mentor? And what types of mentors are there?
Folks, if you're looking for mentors, one of the things you've got to be able to do is build relationships, even with folks who are behaviorally different from you. And the way to learn how to do that is to take the MT disc and come to the Effective Communicator Conference. One of the mistakes that people make is early in their career, they generally work around people who have similar behavioral styles than them. But as you grow, you're going to be exposed to a lot of different behavioral styles. Having flexibility and knowing how to identify people who behave differently than you and make adjustments will help your career go very much better. In the beginning, your career is all about results. At the end, your career is all about relationships.
This is the second chapter of Types of Mentors we have done. There's another chapter, Chapter 1, cleverly named.
We like to number them numerically.
Exactly, in order. And the reason we have done this is because it's rare to find a mentor that can be everything to you. And it's kind of bad to expect that of some single person. A lot of mentors could give you, if you're in a science role, they could give you the science and tell you about what you should be publishing or what's well thought of in the science realm, but maybe they can't help you with relating to other people or being a team leader. And you can't really expect someone, it's rare that somebody is good at everything. It's rare even more that they're good at it and they can teach other people that thing. And so the reality is you're not going to find one person who can tell you everything. And so you have to have more than one mentor. And in the previous cast and this one, we're going to talk about types of mentors that you want to have. So if you've got one person, you can think of these as different facets of the same person. But what you're probably going to end up with is multiple mentors who maybe have one or two of these facets. And you'll need 10 or more people that you call mentors.
Yeah. The outline for today is an industry expert, a functional expert, an innovator, and a historian. And this is it. I mean, this is kind of the rubric that we're going to talk through today. And I think, Wendy, you touched on a lot of great points in the introduction. There's a lot of different ways you can use this and you can apply this. If you have a mentor now, this is a great way to, I struggle with the term measure them, but you know what I mean? Like evaluate where else you have opportunities for mentorship. And, what Wendy said in the introduction that I thought was brilliant is it's almost like you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket.
That too.
Right? I mean, what are the benefits of having a mentor? That third party objectivity, perspective, all of that stuff. And by having an additional 2, 3, 4, 10 mentors, you're just getting more of that. There's virtually zero downside.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I think this is going to be a fun cast.
So we're going to start with an industry expert. And we've explained this before, but I'm going to explain it again in case this is the first cast you've ever listened to. All jobs are divided into two parts, the function and the industry. So you can be a lawyer, which is a function, in a healthcare firm, which is an industry. Or alternatively, you could be a nurse, which is the function, in a law firm, which is the industry. And so you can be an IT guy in, auto manufacturing, or in higher education, or in Starbucks, which is retail. So you can be the IT guy in any of those and a million other industries because everybody's using IT. So you want someone who understands that industry that you're working in. So someone who understands retail or healthcare or auto manufacturing as a whole and not just from the IT perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think the IT example is a brilliant one because, someone who's in IT in retail is going to work with different things than someone who's in IT at an accounting firm. Someone in IT in an accounting firm is going to work probably primarily with desktops, network security, cloud-based systems, and folder storage and stuff like that. But someone who's in IT in retail is going to work probably primarily with point of sale systems, sales tracking systems, and those are very different things.
Right. And if you want to know where your industry is going, asking the guy who's been working with IT desktops in an accounting firm, when what you want to know is about point of sales and where that might go, is completely useless to you. So you want someone who has the factual knowledge about your industry, but also someone who is really well connected within it. And if you regularly read research or keep abreast of conversations on forums or at industry meetings, you might have noticed a trend that we've noticed, which is that news starts on the most informal of media. So Twitter or in forums or like one-to-one conversations or on Facebook. It's the people talking who are on the ground, and they're not talking to a wide audience. They're talking to people they know in general. And then it starts to appear on online articles. So you might see an article that says, trending on Twitter this week was this, and we think it means this, and this is what it means for the industry. And it's a little bit more thought through. It's a little bit more abstract, it has a little bit more context and commentary, but it's not, everything you need to know. And then a few months later, it appears in a print magazine or a bigger online publication. That the first ones tend to be blog posts or Medium post or on Substack. Gosh, it's hard to say. Where it's, again, one person giving their opinion to a relatively small audience. And then it starts to appear on things like Wired, which is it's still an online publication. And it's in print as well, but it's still an online publication, but it's a bigger audience. And again, it's a bit more thought through. It has a wider perspective. It has more commentary. And then it'll appear in the print magazine. And it might only, to start with, have a sort of watch this kind of article, maybe half a column or a column. And again, it will have a little bit more context. It'll be a little bit more abstract, a little bit more commentary. And then only then does it start to appear in newspapers. Because, if you think about something that starts as like self-driving cars, starts as a rumor that somebody has made one and this is what's happening. And then it starts with the people online going, we've heard that somebody's making a self-driving car and this is what we expected and so on. And then it gets to the magazines. And only when it's much more than a rumor, it's got to be that the newspaper has gone to the company and said, are you really making a self-driving car? And they've said yes. That then it starts to be the bigger pieces in newspapers or Sunday newspapers, where it's an article, not just like, a paragraph of like, there was a fire, but an article with context and commentary and so forth. If you only read the newspapers, you are literally at least 6 months behind everybody else. And only then, another 6 months later, does it become a book about whatever this trend was. So unless you're talking with the people right at the beginning of that piece, if you know who those people are who are on the ground and at the cutting edge, or as they used to say, the bleeding edge, which is even further forward, you are learning about stuff with everybody else, which I guess is fine. But if you want to be the person who knows and who is able to take advantage of what's coming, you have to be further downstream of that information.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think of like the Wall Street Journal as what you just said. Right. It's only going to get to the Wall Street Journal when it's fully baked. There's a much bigger story. There's all of that stuff, which is why it's been interesting lately. And maybe it's not been lately, and I've just noticed it lately. Sometimes I will get like breaking news things, alerts from Wall Street Journal. And I'm like, well, wait, it's still developing. It's that juxtaposed with the Wall Street Journal just doesn't make sense to me. But it makes perfect sense to the point that they know, I'm sure, that that's an opportunity for them, because that's not the cultural or societal expectation of the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal is
measured.
It's only there.
Through,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not rumor or conjecture. It's yeah, exactly. But there's way too much news to keep up with. I mean, there's so much out there. Even in the most niche areas, like, we have a random example. Concrete production for parking lots. So, I mean, like the smallest little thing is so niche that you can't be ahead of the news on everything. But there are some people who are so well connected or well read or have an innate sense of what the future will hold, they do seem almost to have just this ability to know what's going on right now, right?
Yeah.
In the zeitgeist. And being connected with those people, you're able to take advantage of that news when it's in its infancy, before it's become, a book or in newspapers 6 months down the road.
And the good thing about those people is often they're the people that can translate what's happening into words that you can understand. Now, they're not always those people, because being able to understand something and being able to teach it or make someone else understand it are two very different skills. But there are some smart people, and you can never learn anything from them because you don't understand a word they say. But there are smart people who are on that bleeding edge who can explain things and what that might mean. And those are the people you want to look for.
Mm-hmm. And often you can find this type of person in industry associations. Now, they may not be running the show, but they're the person who everyone knows, everyone recommends you get to know them. By the way, we recommend that you join an industry association if you have one or one is applicable to your industry. This will help you meet a mentor like this in a much more organic way.
And so one attribute that you might not want, probably don't want from this mentor if they're the only one you have, is that they're an academic. And that's not to say that you don't need to know, or it's not helpful to know academics who study the areas which affect your work. It's just to say that academic research is often done for the sake of the research itself, and it's not necessarily ready for commercialization or widespread adoption, or even that it will ever be commercialized. The object of doing a PhD is to research something that's never been researched before. And so that may be the tiniest sliver of something, because that's the thing you can find in your area when you're deciding what to do for your PhD. And the other thing is that a lot of the time academic papers are limited. So they'll often use students as their subjects, which is fine because that's what they're supposed to do. But the one that I remember reading that drove me nuts was they gave people a stack of resumes and they asked them to assess them for something. I don't remember what the something was, but the people they asked to assess it were students. And then they said that they could then extrapolate from that what recruiters would see in these resumes. It was like, no way is that going to happen, because students have no clue what a resume should look like, as evidenced by every student resume I've ever looked at. And even hiring managers or people that have never hired don't understand what recruiters look for. So whilst it was solid research, it wasn't useful in the real world. And that's limitation. That's the boundary you might come up with if you have an academic as a mentor for your industry information, and only that academic.
Yeah, great point.
Folks, we're going to continue talking about careers here. If you're looking for a mentor, you want to grow. And so I highly recommend you become a licensee if you're not already. For $200 a year, you get access to our entire archive of show notes. Every single show has show notes. And that'll save you time when you can't listen for 45 minutes and you want to be able to read in 5 or 10 or 15 minutes. The well-written white paper-like show notes, not like other podcast show notes, which are just sort of transcripts and bullet points. We write them as if they could stand alone, because for many, quote, listeners, unquote, who are actually readers, they read them without listening to the podcast. Why would you want to listen to me? I can see why you'd want to listen to Kate and Sarah, but maybe not to me. So become a licensee. For $200 a year, you get all the access to show notes. You also get the interviewing series. You also get First Job Fundamentals, and you also get access to Executive Tools, which has been out for a year now and has turned out to be a big hit with our licensees. So come to the website, become a licensee.
The next mentor that we recommend is a functional expert. So we recommend that you have a relationship with a person who is an expert in the functional area in which you work. So this is someone who's an expert in the work that you actually do. Like the industry expert, you're looking for someone with deep knowledge and also a lot of connections in the area in which you work. This might be someone on a committee for standards or who speaks at conferences on the topic of your work. it may be a stretch to get to know these people. They're often well known and therefore have a lot of requests for their time.
So there's a few ways to go about developing a relationship in this area. The first would be to volunteer for the organization or at a conference where you know that person is speaking. And we're not just saying this, like, this is my way to get to know someone I want to meet. It's really fun to volunteer for a conference as a way to get to know more people in general. And if you're an introvert and you don't like lots of people, then having a job to do is really helpful in breaking the ice and having something to talk about and having something to hide behind when you need it.
Right.
You can tell I'm an introvert too. It's a really good way to go to a conference and meet a lot of people without being overwhelmed, is to have a job to do. And we always say, if you're building a relationship, give first, give of yourself first. And volunteering is a really good way to give first. If you're the main speaker at a conference and someone brings you a bottle of water because that's their job to make sure that speakers have got a bottle of water, you're going to say thank you and ask them their name and remember them. And so if you're the guy who brings the water, and it doesn't sound like a grand job, but actually it gives you a chance to speak to someone that you probably wouldn't otherwise be able to speak to. And the other way to do this is to look for this type of person on a more local level. So, for example, someone who presents at the local chapter of an organization rather than at the national conferences. So I'm in San Antonio, so I might look for someone in San Antonio or Austin rather than looking for someone who's presenting in DC at the national conference of whatever.
Yeah. And these experts, both industry and functional, and the ones that we're about to recommend that you add to your list, they might be working close to you too. So don't forget to look within your company, within your organization. Don't forget to look close to home is the thing to remember here. We, sometimes we think of mentors and we start looking way out at the horizon rather than just looking at the guy who's down the hall.
And it's amazing how much people have done that you don't know about. Sometimes I go to Toastmasters things and I'll be like, oh, I know so-and-so. And they're like, did you know he did X before he retired? Or did you know he works for... And I'm like, no, I did not know that thing. Because you kind of get to know people in a limited way and you don't hear their entire history at the same time. And so people that you think you know quite well might have things to offer.
Absolutely.
Okay, so next one is an innovator. So this is a relationship with someone who works at the bleeding edge of your industry and function. And innovation often implies something technological or something new in fast-moving industries. But actually, all industries have innovators. And I wrote this sentence and then I was like, well, no, I'm going to have to prove it. So I thought of the most uninnovatable thing that I could, which was fences around cattle on cattle ranches. I just think of barbed wire and maybe electric fences. That's it. Like we've been doing that since the 1900s. How could they have changed it? Well, there's a lot happening in the world of ranch fences. There are apps to alert you when a fence breaks. There are innovations in staple guns to make putting the fences up easier. And there's even GPS trackers and geofencing, which means that there's no actual fence, but the cows still can't leave the ranch, which is just amazing. I just think that's the coolest thing in fencing, which I thought was the least innovatable product possible.
I have to tell you, Wendy, and I wasn't planning on sharing this with you, but I was equally as amazed when I read this paragraph, when I was reading this cast before we were going to record it. And I was so amazed that I went and told my wife, I said, did you know that there's all this stuff happening in livestock fencing? And I was sure she was going to say, oh, no, I didn't realize that. That. But no, she actually said, yeah, I did know that. And I said, no, you didn't. And she said, yeah. So my wife works in the insurance industry on the claim side. And she said, no, I do know a little bit about that because we've had a lot of claims. She handles a lot of Texas claims. And we've had a lot of claims about people hitting cows on the road. And so livestock fencing is a hot topic in insurance industry because of that reason. It's crazy. Like how it's amazing. Who would have known? Yeah.
I had no idea.
No, me neither.
Amazing. So innovation is everywhere. And if you think about it, if companies don't innovate, they don't survive. And if you think that innovation isn't happening in your industry or company, I think you need to look harder, because
yes,
if fencing is it, then who knew?
Right.
And if you don't find it, start looking for a new career, because that's a really bad
scary
sign about your company and your industry.
Yeah, if you're not innovating or there's no innovation near you, that's worrisome. So, from the leading edge of innovations like these to the majority of the users using them, it takes a long time. And you may not see a GPS cow in person for, maybe a few years, but knowing the innovator and knowing what is coming is a huge advantage for your career. Knowing, someone who has awareness of that stuff is going to be very, very beneficial. So the last mentor that we recommend that you have a relationship with is a historian. So someone who has been around a long time. It's common for those who are earlier in their career to dismiss their more experienced colleagues, especially those, ironically, this is an interesting segue, especially those who struggle with the newest technology. We think of them as, Luddites, or they're just out of touch or whatever. But those people, they're the people that can tell you why things are done a certain way. So they're the ones who have seen it done the wrong way, and they know what the consequences are. So even if they struggle with the implementation of new technology, they have so much more perspective and understanding around the process, and not just, why we use this particular piece of software.
It's like all your teachers told you at school when you said, why can't I use a calculator? And they say, because you have to understand how the math works in order to know whether the answer the calculator gives you is right or not. And it's kind of like that. A lot of the time, we're so far removed from the core of what it is we're trying to do that we try and we get excited about all these bells and whistles, and we forget this is what we're trying to do. Just before I was on this call, Mike and Alex and I were looking at some software, and they were saying, well, we could use this example and we'll just start. And I said, no, I think you should just start from scratch, because then you're building from the basic building blocks and you know what you want to achieve, rather than something that someone else designed and then you're kind of retrofitting it. It just makes it so much harder. And having someone, in this instance, I'm the historian to Mike, who is older than me, but it's only because I've been playing with this software for 2 months and he hasn't.
Right.
But someone with that kind of perspective who can say, no, you have to understand, when we were writing this with pencil, this is what the answer was. So now we have to make sure the calculator says it too.
Show your work. These folks also tend to have larger networks, right? Then they have more solid relationships with others that, frankly, you might want to know. If they're being dismissed by colleagues or your colleagues, the other benefit here is they might actually have more time, right? Because they have a little bit more bandwidth and capability. So yeah, it could be really helpful.
Even the smartest of us, except me, obviously. No, I'm kidding. Even the smartest of us can learn from others. And even those of us with high EQs, that emotional quotient, which is sometimes used to measure people's ability to get on with others and work with others, I guess.
Emotional intelligence, yeah.
We sometimes need help stepping outside of ourselves and having someone look at a situation with us dispassionately. And mentors provide this guidance and more, but no single mentor has to be everything to you. And if you break it up into different components, you might have a number of people to keep track of, which makes things harder for you, but it will enhance your career because it's easier to find someone who can fall into the a historian bracket if you're not trying to make that person the industry specialist and the functional specialist and all of those things as well.
Yeah, I think this is so helpful just to know a structure for what you should be looking for mentors. And some will absolutely cover multiple roles and some won't. And you'll need to branch out and look for mentors that cover those bases. I think it's fantastic.
And we'll make sure on the podcast page for this cast to also link to chapter 1 so you can see which the other suggestions were in chapter 1.
Perfect.
All right. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Wendy.
That's all for this week. We'll be back next week with a new topic.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.